homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. We are doing the in-ground garden tour, kind of mid-September, so a little later than usual. And we're winding down. We're definitely in the final throes of harvest and what's growing out here. But let me show you what's going on in the in-ground garden. And this is going to be pretty quick because there's not a whole lot left out here to show you. I'm in Southeast Washington, Zone 7A. We have about 170 days of frost-free growing and less than 20 inches of rain a year. So this is the dry side of Washington, not the wet side of Washington. And these are 100-foot rows that are irrigated with a drip tape. And I have really lovely sandy loam soil, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And then this year, my garden is considerably smaller than it has been in the past in terms of in-ground stuff. We're scaling way back. And so really it's just this middle section that is fully planted out. We have one very late tomato plant that went in here that I'm finally getting a few tomatoes on it. We'll see if we get much before it gets too cold or too wet. We usually start getting rain this time of year, which makes all of the ripe tomatoes split. Excuse the construction noise in the background. I have a neighbor about less than a quarter of a mile away who's in the process of building a house, and so there's lots of banging going on. This is our tobacco, which I have no intention of actually harvesting. I'm just in it to see what the plant looks like. And you can see a nice overview of that and some discussion on that on my August video. But it is still blooming, starting to set seed. And this one, I would guess that's probably at least 8 feet tall. So way up there. The rest of this row was flowers. These are mostly Rudbeckias that are pretty much done for the season. We'll see if any of them manage to overwinter. I imagine most of them usually don't. This was a cherry Rudbeckia, and then I have a whole bunch of Sahara Rudbeckia in other places out here. This is an echinacea that I grew from seed. They don't often bloom the first year, they're perennial, but it looks like we might get a flower out of that before we're done. And then some of the basil. At this point, I'm no longer harvesting this, but I love to leave basil once it's gone to flower for the bees, because they absolutely love it. It is pollinator paradise. And then in the middle of this being nicely trellised by the basil, normally these are sprawlers, this is a ground cherry that was just a volunteer. They come up all over my garden, and you can see there's some nice ground cherries on there that aren't quite ready. I'll probably get a small handful of these before we get a frost. It was kind of a late germination because it was coming up when the weather got warm. Normally you start those when you start your tomatoes in a greenhouse. And then the rest of this row, along with lots of weeds and a beautiful volunteer sunflower. This is melons, and I haven't had a great melon year. Usually I get pretty good melons, and I'm not sure if it was just heat, too much heat too fast, which would be my guess. But I have 5 or 6 different kinds of melons in here, and I've gotten 1 or 2 off of each one. And one of them I didn't get to try because I had a pheasant who was living out here, and he decided that those were very tasty, and so he ate some of those. My experience with melons is that they taste best in the dead heat of summer. And so we're now in September. This week our days are going to be in the 70s and our nights are in the kind of low to mid 50s. And that does not make for great tasting melons. And so even though I've still got some out here, they are probably not going to be super flavorful. This one, ironically, is called Small Persian, and there is nothing small about this melon. It's definitely the biggest one I've grown. It is as big as my hand. I've never grown it before, so I don't have anything to compare it to, but it just did one melon and did it really big. This is Tomatillo that also volunteered out here that I've just left. And I don't think I've harvested anything ripe out of here, but there is quite a bit of fruit on here, so we might get a small handful. It wasn't in a bad place. It was kind of on the edge, and so I just left it. Always fun to see. This is Nicotina. That's just at the finish line, but I think this has probably been blooming pretty much continuously for 3 months, which is pretty impressive. So going, trying to see if there's anybody else in here that I wanted to show you guys. Yeah, this guy. So here's some late comers that probably really just won't be all that great flavor-wise just because it's so late in the season. But melons, a handful. This is the only one I have of this variety. I'll put the name up on the screen. And it's one of those ones where you're not quite sure when it's ripe. I've clearly gotten a color change from here to here, and so it's probably time to pick that one. But one of the things I don't normally do, I don't usually grow melons that don't do what's called slip, where they come loose from the stem when they're ready, simply because I hate guessing whether something's ripe or not. Right next to this, just for fun, this is holy basil, also called Tulsi. And this was a volunteer from having it in here last year. And I haven't done a whole lot with it, but again, pollinators absolutely love anything in the basil family. And so just leaving this here, and honestly, I can smell this just from standing here. It is very, very fragrant and very distinct. Here we have one that's clearly ready to come out. I picked its friend a couple of days ago. This is not wanting to come loose. This is Ariva, and I'm not sure why that's not. There we go. This is a Israeli green cantaloupe that I really like the flavor of, so we'll bring that in the house. The corn out here is all finished. We harvested probably about 120 ears, most of which I sold, and then I processed the smaller cobs and the ones that were a little bit more buggy and froze a lot of it. And I may take some of that frozen corn and ultimately do something with it canning-wise. I have a nice recipe for a corn relish that's really good on tacos and lovely for camping trips and things like that. But corn is all finished and done. And interestingly, based on the date that I planted the corn, it was a 79 days till harvest. And I would say that was spot on. It was ready just about exactly 79 days. So this is the one exception to the rule in terms of planting harvest dates. I find corn is quite accurate. This is mostly a weedy bean row. This particular bean on the end here is a tepiary. And this is a native to the Southwest little bean that almost looks like a lentil. And I did come out here and harvest a nice little batch of these just because they were starting to get dry and I didn't want them to drop. I didn't have a whole lot of germination on this. Here's an example, and I really wanted to make sure that they didn't drop and that I lost them, because since I didn't have a lot of germination, if I like these and want to grow them again, I'm trying to expand my sample size. But this is what they look like. And they come in many, many, many different colors, so this happened to just be the one that I picked. And you can see, like, these plants pretty much done. These plants still have some pods that I could pick on them. And then there's a few like this where this isn't quite dry yet. So clearly some staggered harvest window in terms of when these are ready to go. The rest of this row, as I said, more beans and a lot of weeds. I had some beans that didn't germinate this year and I never got around to replanting that section. Some beautiful zinnias that are marking where I was supposed to be changing varieties. A little bit more tobacco here. Not nearly as big. This got planted much later and was a little bit stunted. But this is a combination of two different varieties that are very similar to each other. I'll put the names on the screen. They're supposed to both be good for baked beans. And since they were so similar in terms of character traits, and beans are pretty self-fertile, so they won't really easily cross, I just planted them together because I don't really care. But you can see these are getting ready to be picked. and nicely drying out. I've got quite a bit of harvest out here. Do you guys do this? You grow dried beans and then you stick them in your pocket and then you forget they're in your pocket, and then you do laundry and you have dried beans in your washing machine? I've done that more times than I can count. Another little lovely white cream colored zinnia in here. And at this point I am mostly just letting them go because I would like them to go to seed so that I can collect and grow some seed from them. Nothing grew in here, so this is strictly weeds, and I just haven't weeded it. Lots of amaranth, lots of prickly lettuce, lots of south thistle. And then this one is the mixed bean variety. And so I'm gonna have different harvest windows in here because it is different kinds. You can see like these are starting to get dried out and pretty much finished versus these guys, which are clearly still pretty green. I've got a lot of grass in here. I have to admit, after not getting germination planting twice on a couple of these varieties, I lost a lot of my momentum. And so we'll get a harvest out of here, but not a great bean year and not a lot of motivation to maintain these as well as I should have. And then the rest of this was coriander that I have now harvested as much of the seed as I want. And it's weedy, and we'll probably get a lot of volunteer coriander in here next spring as well. This section was onions. All of the onions have now been harvested and they're drying in my greenhouse. I had a Cipollini, which is an Italian heirloom variety, and then a yellow storage onion and a red storage onion. And those are now all out. I got some really big yellow storage onions. I didn't plant nearly as many onions as I normally do this year, but got a nice harvest of the ones that I did. Not surprisingly, given that we're in Walla Walla, we do well with onions. This is some celery that I just happened to have some extra plants, and there were some onions that didn't survive there, and so I tucked celery in a couple of different places. It likes fall, cool weather, and so it's going to get a lot of growth just in the next month before I harvest it all. And then the rest of this row was primarily flowers. You can see at this point, the flowers are pretty much done, and the weeds have pretty much won. There's still a few lovelies in there. And if you really want to see this row in all of its glory, go back to the July video garden tour, because just incredible in July. But at this point, you know, these were snapdragons. They have mostly gone to seed. I'll probably save some seed from these. This variety was called Cherry Twist, and I really enjoyed it. Although the one I'm starting to really love zinnias just because they do keep blooming all the way through the season. And the one thing that is sad about snapdragons, as much as I absolutely love them in terms of all the colors, is they do just kind of peter out and start looking really ragged as you get late into the season, which of course is what's happening here. One of this is called Sunrise Mix, and one of this is called Berries. And I think they're kind of mixed together in here, so I don't know which is which, but I would assume that dark red is a berries color, and some of these lighter pinks and white with pink is probably the Sunrise Mix. These are seeds from Johnny's. The rest of this row is herbs. This is marjoram. I have probably harvested this at least 3 times. And this will die completely back with a frost. And so when I get notice that we're going to get a frost, I will just cut the rest of these plants out at the base and harvest them and dry them. I use marjoram in several of my spice blends that I sell, including an Italian blend. It's a very lovely kind of floral oregano type herb that I think most people don't do much with. Signet marigold still hanging in there. Plants kind of flopped over, but man, this thing bloomed for 3 months straight. It's been amazing. Some parsley, flat leaf parsley. I do plan on doing, I have a flat leaf parsley pesto recipe that's an old Alton Brown recipe. I am going to make a batch of that to freeze for later in the year, and then I will probably also offer up through our local food hub some fresh chimichurri as we're moving into fall grilling season. Chimichurri is delicious, and that's primarily parsley as well, so that will be fun. And then I had some, like clearly some issues in here. You can see there's some damage there in the middle. This could be gophers. We do have a lot of gophers in here because it seems to be recovering. Like the new growth on this plant looks great. It could be insects, hard to know. This one looked good in the spring, has died almost completely back to nothing. This one died almost completely back to nothing in the spring and is now coming back great guns. So that, to me, is probably a pretty good indication that there's a gopher in there chewing on the roots, which is often what happens. They do like parsley roots. This is Zatar. Zatar is a wild, kind of a wild oregano, basically is what I'd call it. The leaves are a lot more fuzzy than regular oregano or marjoram are. And if you've ever run across Zatar in Middle Eastern spice mixes, it is this along with sumac and sesame. And a lot of times when you make it in the United States, people use thyme or oregano or some combination of the two rather than the actual wild Zatar plant, which is a different species altogether. This is tender perennial. Sometimes it will survive the winter, but rarely. And so this is another one that I will probably just cut completely back at the base once we know we're going to get a frost. But I've had several harvests off of that, and it does seem to be getting a nice second wind as our weather is finally cooling off. This is one of the floret zinnias. It's the only one I have out here. I'm definitely going to save seed from this as well. I've heard rumors that she is not going to be offering seed next spring. And I mean, her seed packs are $20 a piece, so I didn't buy any. I just bought this from a local nursery who had bought some and got some started. But I have to admit, I have kind of completely fallen in love with these paler colored zinnias instead of everything looking like bubblegum. And I'm going to save seed from this and see what I get, because they are just absolutely lovely. She has a bunch of different kinds. A little bit of old dill that is just completely done at this point, and then yet more basil. This row, again, finishing up on the zinnias, volunteer tomatillo. I always put the tomatillos at the end of my row when I plant tomatoes, and so if I'm going to get volunteer tomatillos, they're almost always at the end of the row because that's where the plants were the previous years. So this is the tail end of Sahara Rudbeckia. Some cabbage plants that will make little small cabbages. Have you guys ever done this where you pick the main head and then the plants just keep going and they send out little side things? They're kind of almost like a Brussels sprout. I have bad aphids in my brassicas out here right now. You can see I've got a ladybug in there. And there's a lot of ladybugs in here doing their best, but I don't think they're going to win the war at this point. There's just way too many aphids, and I've done virtually nothing to control them because these were bonus plants and I didn't really, but can you see in there? Oh, there's so many aphids. But I'm making a lot of ladybugs really, really happy. Same thing. Note this dog who has gone and found himself a tomato. These dogs eat more fruit and vegetables than any dogs I've ever seen in my life. They just absolutely love them. I have to watch him or he'll pick them right off of the plant. Little bugger. This is a dinosaur kale, lacinato kale. Millions of aphids in there. And then this was Russian kale. Was is the operative word. It is completely done because of all the aphids. Oh, and just for fun. So there is the little white butterfly moth, cabbage butterfly moth. Can you guys see? That is a larval caterpillar from the white cabbage butterfly moth. So again, I've done nothing in here to try to maintain these. I haven't sprayed them. I've just kind of let them go. And so, yeah, the critters are having a field day. Some nice thyme, which I will also harvest one more time before our season is finished. And this is perennial. This will overwinter. And so I'll probably leave this to grow over the winter and then transplant it. This is Italian oregano, different from Greek oregano. At this point, I don't need any more of it. I have a ton dried, and so I'm just leaving it for the bees. Tender perennial, sometimes will survive, sometimes won't. Also, sometimes will reseed. And so just leaving it for the pollinators, and I may or may not get some reseeding from this next year, or it may survive. But I have one in a pot that will come inside so that I make sure that I have it. And then the entire rest of this row was potatoes. And so we harvested most of our potatoes probably 3 weeks ago. And then we just harvested the last of them, the plants that weren't quite ready 3 weeks ago. We harvested the last of it last weekend. So all the potatoes are out of the ground. This particular variety, Yukon Gem, which is not the same as Yukon Gold, but is related. For whatever reason, this particular variety did not germinate well when I planted the seeds. And so I only had, I think, 3 or 4 plants in here instead of 6 or 8. And so there's some Rudbeckia tucked into the holes because I had some extra plants. And I think it was partly a gopher issue because we did find quite a few in this area that were eaten by gophers. And so it could have just been that the seeds themselves got eaten, although I dug them up multiple times trying to figure out why they weren't coming up and found them. So I don't know what happened. But for whatever reason, that was my one not quite as successful potato variety, but we got a very nice harvest this year. More very pretty zinnias. Up and down this row, there's zinnias and marigolds to mark where the different varieties of potatoes were. But those are all now out, so this row is finished. And then lastly, going back to the top of the row again, this is more herbs. There's some sage, rosemary. These rosemary are finally taking off. They don't love the heat. They're fine with it, but they will just kind of sit. And so I'm probably going to get some nice new growth here in the next month as it cools off before it gets too cold. Our rosemary generally doesn't overwinter here. We're just a little bit too cold. So I'm going to just, again, this is going to be a cut to the ground once we get ready to have a frost, and I'll just dry all of it. More basil. And then a few pepper plants. I didn't do a ton of peppers this year. You'll see I have other peppers in my raised bed garden. That if you watch that garden tour, all of my sweet peppers are in there. But these are poblanos, which I really love. I find it's very hard to get very, very big poblanos without a ton of fertilizer. And so I just kind of let them do their thing. But I'm getting some of these aren't too bad. This is about the time of year where I attempt to make chili rellenos very badly because they're very fiddly and I'm not very good at it. But I do very much enjoy poblanos. I love them roasted. And we roast and freeze a lot of them to use in recipes all winter long. Love the flavor. So I've got some good sized ones in here. These do turn red when they're ripe, and you can dry them. And a dried red poblano, I guess that one's coming in with me because I just heard it snap. Dried red poblanos are called anchos. And sometimes they will turn bright red, sometimes they will turn kind of a brick red. It depends on the particular variety that you have, but they are very, very nice as a dried chili pepper as well. So double duty, wonderful, wonderful variety. If I could only grow one kind of hot pepper, honestly, it would probably be poblanos. This is Hungarian black. Very similar to a jalapeno, not a lot of heat, very pretty little flowers. And I have one of these in my raised bed garden and then one of them out here. So I've got just one of those hanging in there. On this side, we have regular jalapeno. Oh, there's a lot of fruit on here. And jalapenos, when they're red, that means they're ripe. And so we usually use jalapenos green, but all peppers turn some other color but green as they ripen. And so jalapenos happen to turn red. I have a ton of cowboy candy, and so I don't need any more of that this year. I just saw a stink bug in here, and it would be nice to show you that because it's one of the pests on these. They've got little pokey mouth parts, and they will poke holes in the skin of the pepper. Same thing with tomato. They like both, and it usually doesn't do enough damage to ruin the fruit, but you'll get these little hard spots. Anyway, so one jalapeno in here. I have 2 of this Sugar Rush peach. Sugar Rush peach turns this lovely peachy color when it's fully ripe. When it's unripe, it's kind of this yellow green. And either way, they make a fantastic hot sauce. And so I have a couple of these in here because I made a last minute end of season hot sauce out of these last fall, and it was our favorite hot sauce that we made. And so I'm just going to pick all of these en masse and make a big batch of hot sauce with them. I have a ton of hot sauce. So that's part of why I didn't do a lot of peppers, because I had so much leftover hot sauce from last year that I didn't really need them. And then the rest of these are a variety of Korean pepper that's kind of a middle heat, not super hot, less hot than a cayenne, that are really good dried as just a flaked red pepper. And so that's the other variety that I have in here, and I need to get out here and harvest some of these and throw them in my dehydrator. And then of course the entire rest of this is tomatoes. I have paste tomatoes on this end, regular slicing and eating tomatoes in the middle, and then cherry tomatoes on the other end. And we had a couple of weeks ago now at this point, we had this freak windstorm. Our winds almost always come out of the south, which is this direction. And we had a windstorm that came out of the north. And what it ended up doing, I have these big 5-foot tomato cages in here, and the bottom of these are pokey, you know, there's the whole circle is tines that will stick into the ground. And so they're pretty well secured. And the wind blew about half of these tomatoes completely over into the sunflowers that are behind there. So that was super fun to come out the next morning and find basically half of my tomatoes tipped over. And they're so heavy with all the vegetation and all the fruit that it was really, really hard to pick them back up again. And also because they've all grown into each other. I don't prune my tomatoes. I have a whole video on that if you guys are curious. It's not required for our climate, and I have a lot of room, and so it's just too much work for me given that I don't really need it. So I don't prune, but yeah, so everything fell over and thankfully it didn't tear anything out of the ground, and so they're all fine. But these look like, you know, September tomatoes. The plants are starting to get a little ragged. We're probably getting some late blight. Things are looking a little sad. And then we get a lot of splitting this time of year as we start getting more moisture, and a lot more insect damage as well. This variety was supposed to be a Cherokee Purple, and it's clearly not. I believe this is a pineapple, also called Anise Noir, and it's just hasn't been a great plant this year. I'm not really sure what happened there, but not my favorite for sure. And then you can see how this whole thing is leaning. So try to stand that back up again a little bit. So paste tomatoes, mostly done. This is Anthony's Heart, and there's been a nice second flush of growth on here. But a lot of these are good for sauce. There's a lot of splitting. There's gonna be a lot of damage to cut out. You can see how the whole top of that, actually that almost looks like teeth marks. We also have pheasants and other critters that are coming out here this time of year and helping themselves to things. It could have also been a dog, who the heck knows. This is Hog Heart paste tomato, and then the one next to it is called Blue Beach. I think the Hog Heart has been a lot more prone to blossom end rot, which is what the end of this is looking like. But I've got a nice harvest off of both of these, and I still have yet to do a side-by-side. I really need to do a side-by-side taste test of the two to see if there's one that I like better than the other. But you can see here's a Blue Beach right here. Astiana, this is a fun story, this plant, about a couple who went to Italy and were renting an apartment that had a stove, and they bought some tomatoes at the farmer's market to make sauce. Really loved the sauce, and so they dug the seeds out of the compost and brought them back. They were farmers, brought them back to Western Oregon and bred them for many, many years and turned them into this tomato they called Astiana. And it's interesting. It's a paste tomato. It's an indeterminate, although I would say it's almost acting like a determinate. We got a really nice harvest off of this. And then I've got like no fruit set. I mean, there's almost nothing left on here. I guess there is some. There's a little bit of late season. They have these nice lobes. They're a really pretty little tomato. But I think it's pretty much done. I don't think what I've got left in there is going to have time to ripen before we get a frost. We'll see. Maybe I'll get another quick harvest. This is Japanese black trifle. I definitely need to come through here and do a harvest on these again. A really lovely eating tomato, and it was super early. Like I had a really good early harvest off of this. Lots and lots and lots of tomatoes. Oh yeah, look at that. Somebody has definitely come through and been chewing on stuff. I'm not sure who that is. Maybe the deer have been in here. That's certainly possible, because that's high. That's not a dog. Interesting. Oh, this is Paul Robeson, which somebody obviously really likes the flavor of. Really great eating tomato. But again, I mean, you can see this one in here, definitely cracked. So the fruit is definitely getting ragged. We are not at the premium part of the season anymore. This is another Anise Noir. Plant was never terribly vigorous this year. I need to find a different seed source for this. I like the tomato a lot, but plants have not been super great. You can see how this whole tomato plant is trying to fall over. This is Dr. Wychee. I will say, of like old heirloom varieties, I think Wychee is probably one of the best in terms of productivity. I get a ton of tomatoes off of this plant, and they are very nice eating. So lots of Wychees. Part of the problem right now with this, the wind blowing things over, is that nothing is actually secured into the ground anymore because it all came up when the windstorm came through. So things are rather precarious, and I am too lazy to go through and secure everything at this late date when we're about a month out from frost. So it's a losing battle. This is Canner Howell, and I have a lot of my big baseball-sized slicing tomatoes in here right now that I need to go through and do a harvest on. So lots of these. They have been fantastic. I think this has probably been one of the best years I've had for just the kind of standard baseball-sized heirloom slicing tomatoes. Absolutely fantastic. So Canner Howell, Brandywine, and this is Brandywine. There are many, many different varieties of Brandywine out there. This one is seed from Peaceful Valley Organics, and I don't know where they're wholesaling it out of, but I've had better luck with this Brandywine than a lot of the other varieties that I've grown over the years. I think it's consistent. It doesn't tend to split very much, if at all. And you can see how many beautiful tomatoes are still in here. So still going strong. This is what I need to do, is come out and, like, there's a whole bunch of them that are like on the ground. Those are definitely not going to hold well because the bugs are going to get to them. So I need to get out here and pick. Again, lots of production, and really great production for late in the year, which is impressive. And then this is Mortgage Lifter, also from Peaceful Valley Organic. In terms of seeds, I imagine there's a bunch of different varieties of that out there in the world as well. But beautiful, beautiful tomatoes out here, still going strong. I've got a whole second wind happening on Mortgage Lifter. Everything else out here is cherry tomato. My Principes, this little Italian variety that has the little nipple on the end. Really nice drying tomato and not a bad eating tomato. Not super sweet, but a nice complex flavor. These took forever to start producing. We had a weird year in terms of heat, and they just did not love it. And so I have been just getting like small handfuls out of here, and then we harvested Saturday, and I ended up with 17 pints. So it's definitely late. I feel like our whole tomato season has shifted about 2 weeks later than it used to be. Crazy. This is the green stalk cherry tomato that I think is probably Juliet. Don't know for sure, but she's been quite productive in the last couple of days. And then I have a Peacevine cherry tomato and one called Harvest Luck. Harvest Luck is sweeter. I believe Harvest Luck is supposed to be similar to Sweet 100, but the problem with Harvest Luck is it's a lot more prone to splitting, and so I've had a lot of these that have gone to the dogs simply because they split. So sweeter flavor, definitely more prone to splitting. It's been nice to have both varieties just for the contrast. And you can see, like, here's Peacevine. Here's the next plant over, and you can see there's Peacevine climbed up into there. So everything is just intermixed at this point, which is why everything fell over together. This is Black Cherry, and Black Cherry, really nice eating tomato. and we have harvested lots. I would say this has probably been the most productive of the cherry tomatoes this year. It took a little while for it to get going. It always does, but man, oh man, did we ever get a lot of harvest out of here. This, you can see there's dead branches in here. This is from things breaking when the plants fell over. So I've got some damage from that. There's an example of the black cherry, also from Peaceful Valley. And this is a pretty good sized one, but it gives you an idea of even late in the season how big these are. And this will get a little bit darker than this. This one, we just picked these Saturday, so they're not super ripe because we pulled all the ripe ones out, but really nice productive variety. I love this tomato. And then this has been the Santiam Sunrise. I won't plant this again. Not my favorite at all. It's got a nice flavor, but weirdly angry all summer. It hasn't been terribly productive. And just very, very slow to get growing, although now it is finally getting a little bit happier. So my guess is it just really, really doesn't like the heat, but a nice flavor. Supposed to be similar to Sun Gold. Tomatillos here on the end. As I said, I always put my tomatillos on the end. Had a very nice flush early on, and then the plants have not been super happy ever since. I did pull about 3 pounds off of these just the other day, but yeah, not super great production after that initial flush, but I got some really good early season stuff. I think they didn't love the heat. Clearly, you know, this is heat or disease or maybe a nutrient issue. Not sure what's going on there, but they're about done for the season. And then the windstorm that we had knocked off a ton of fruit. And so you can see on the ground here, like how much fruit was just knocked off the plant. It wasn't even ripe. It hadn't fully broken out of its shell, and it still just went to town. So lost a lot of fruit on the ground that really wasn't all that salvageable. So that's the main garden. You can see our sunflowers are pretty much finished. Again, if you want great footage of sunflowers, go back and look at July or especially August. We had some very nice flowers in there. We've cut a lot out that were falling into the tomatoes, which happens every year. The birds have been in here. And so you can see, if you look at that, just how picked over that is. If you look at this flower, there's no seed left in there to speak of. And that's actually why I plant them. I plant them for the birds. This one kind of was a late bloomer and it's really just lovely. I was just enjoying this last night as well. So this one has a little bit more color than a lot of the stuff that I planted out here, and really just lovely. So, you know, there's still plenty to enjoy. And I don't know, there's something about shaggy, ratty, half-dried sunflowers that just make me happy. Like there's something photographically about them that I really kind of love. And I think every year I take way too many pictures of dying sunflowers. But I find there's great beauty in them even at this stage. Look at this one. I mean, look at that yellow. That is really, really lemon yellow. That is a gorgeous sunflower. This one fell over in the other direction. Man, if we wanted to harvest seed, there's a lot of seed in these. Some of these are the great big seed head sunflowers. There's a mix of them in there, but that one's ready to go. And then lastly, the only other crop I really have out here is sorghum. And this sorghum, I think, is very happy that it's finally cooled off a little bit. It does okay in the heat, but I feel like this has grown like inches and inches just in the last week now that it's finally cooled off. And so we'll be keeping a close eye on this and making sure that we harvest this for sorghum syrup. I have several videos on that if you're interested on my channel, but we'll harvest this before it gets frosted. Once it gets frosted, it is toxic. Do not eat sorghum for syrup or anything else after it's had a frost. But it's coming along very nicely, and I feel like we're getting a ton of growth right now, which is really exciting. And then again, tomatillo on the end, because that's where my tomatillos always end up. And we did actually pull off 4 or 5 fruits off of this the other day. So this is a late bloomer, but some nice new fruit coming on. So that's what's happening in the weedy, a little bit sad in-ground garden in mid-September. Most of this is done for the season. This in-ground garden is meant for big crops like beans, like potatoes, like corn, like melons, like tomatoes, things you need a lot of room for, things that sprawl. And at this point, most of those things are finished. But there's beauty in the wind blowing through the weeds. There's beauty in all of the goldfinches that are out here feeding on all of the sunflowers. There's beauty in this overcast September day. So thanks so much for joining me on this briefer garden tour. And if you want to know what to do with all of this beautiful produce, check out the rest of my channel. I have lots and lots of recipes for how to cook that harvest. Thanks for watching, tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment and share. I have new content coming out every week.